G'day, Sash faithful. It is time to begin a week of podcasts as we lead into the start of season 2025. This is our season preview, media guests or journalists, you can call them, episode that we're doing here tonight. I'll be joined by Julian De Stoop, Twomey, Marnie Vinall, and Rohan Connolly. It's a fantastic episode, 4 distinct opinions, different ideas as well as we look ahead for season 2025. Some of these were recorded before the second practice match and some of them were recorded after, so you'll see some slightly different opinions there. But look, it's a great podcast. Sit down, enjoy. We'll see you soon. Welcome back, everybody. It is our season preview edition with our various media guests. I'm very happy to be joined by SEN's own Julian De Stoop. G'day, Jules.
Hello, Rob. How you going?
I'm good. Another season on the horizon. How are we feeling?
Excited. What would we say? Cautiously optimistic. Still happy with direction. Excited by some of the young players. But not massive expectations going into a new season. But I still think there's some good times ahead, and I'm just hoping we see some development in some of these young players that we've drafted at the high level, which I don't think we're all convinced of yet. And we say it at the start of every year, and we saw signs of it for large parts of last year, but just being a more difficult team to play against. I want to see that on a more regular basis. Yeah,
I know what you mean. We've seen one practice match so far at the time of recording. Was there any major takeaways that you got out of it? It was pretty hard unless you're at the ground with some pretty grainy footage there at Whitten Oval. Was there anything that caught your eye?
As you say, I think it was pretty hard to take a lot out of it, given both sides were missing significant talent. It was windy, it was wet, it was difficult conditions, but. Obviously, I liked Elijah Sardis's game. It sounds like from all reports he's had a really good summer. I think he's going to get his opportunities early because Darcy Parish won't be playing for a while. And obviously if a young guy comes on and kicks 4 goals in the second half and gets his spot on the list, we're going to need some goal kickers this year. So young Tommy Edwards was pretty promising. But apart from that, I don't think in those conditions there was much to take out of it. But, at least the list's in pretty good shape. I know there's a couple of injuries, but compared to some of the other, look at the team we played on the weekend. Yeah, the Western Bulldogs have had a horror couple of weeks. So touch wood, we get through Geelong and get through the next couple of weeks in training, and there's only really going to be maybe 2 or 3 players unavailable for selection, which is probably something we haven't had for a while.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a lot worse. Obviously, still one more practice game to go against the Cats, and then hopefully we're still in healthy shape coming into the Gold Coast game, because I think if we learned anything from last season is that the Gold Coast up there, it's a bit of a fortress now, so it's going to be hard and you're going to need a full list available. Let's launch straight into our preview questions, mate. And the first one to begin with is, it's a big year for blank.
Can I say everyone?
If you want.
There's a lot to choose from. There's a lot to choose from this year. But I've picked out 3 for various reasons. So I'll start with Archie Perkins. I think he's had a great base. He's played 4 years. He's played 80 games. So you can see the talent in Archie. Part of me feels a bit sorry for Archie. He hasn't really had a defined role. He hasn't had a defined position. We've seen him spend some time on the ball, and then he doesn't get much of an opportunity there, and then goes forward and gets a bit lost a bit. But look, I think at least now he's got a defined position. He's going to play mainly forward. And he's the same size as Cam Rayner. Now, he doesn't have the power yet and the strength. I think he's about 6 or 7 kilos lighter than Cam Rayner. But why can't he be a Cam Rayner type player for Essendon? That sort of player that doesn't need high possessions, but he's good overhead. He's pretty strong. He's strong through the hips. Knows where the goals are. Why can't he be a 20? I think he 31 goals last year. Cam Rayner from 27 games. I think that's the sort of player Archie Perkins can be this year. So, look, you can see the talent. The base is there. I don't know. At times it looks like he's cruising through games, and maybe that's why we're a bit critical of him sometimes. But I think with a defined position now, he's going to be a forward. He's pretty dangerous above the head. He's strong. He's a good finisher. I think I've got some positive thoughts about Archie going into this season, but I just think we need to see the more consistent output. He's been picked pretty much every week, but we need to see a bit more out of him. But as I say, I think it's been pretty tough because he's been thrown around quite a lot.
Yeah, you're right. He's been half forward at times, and then obviously last season he spent a lot of time in the guts, and he started really well, and then he sort of faded away. Like I just pulled up his stats then as you were speaking, and 22 and 23, he kicked 16 and 18 goals, but last season primarily playing as a midfielder, it was just the 5. And look, I think playing forward and, like you said, having a defined role where it's like, hey, your job is to get the ball, set up goals, and kick goals.
Correct.
I think that suits his game because he has had some defensive deficiencies. If we hark back to that tragic night against the Adelaide Crows, where God, I forgot his name, but one of the Crows players just dominated us. But it was
Ben Keys.
Ben Keys, that was it. But if you look at a lot of those stoppages there, unfortunately, it was Archie Perkins who led him away. And if it goes, all right, look, you don't have to go do the dirty work out there in the ground now. You can be at the fun end of the ground, essentially. And we know he's got good skills. He can take a nice mark. He's got a decent set shot on goal. And look, 15 touches and a couple of goals and a goal assist here or two, that's a tick every week. That's all you have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, never been top 10 in the best and fairest. He should be in the top 10 in the best and fairest. With the talent he's got, the age, 23 years of age shortly, 80 games under his belt. These are the sort of players that need to be breaking through and having a significant mark on the season.
Yep. Now, you did say that you had two other guys
I did,
there in the gun.
So
did you want to mention who they were?
I do. So Sam Draper was one of the others for me. So the difference between his best and worst is still too big. You go back to that Gold Coast game late in the season. Perfect example. It was really good. Really good up forward that night. Took some strong marks. I think 3 goals. But then late in the game, he loses 2 crucial one-on-one contests that he never should have lost. He should have halved those contests and we win the game. So it's a big year. He's out of contract, as we know. He looks fit. And he's going to have to play quite a bit of footy forward by the look of it. Nick Bryan is going to play a lot of ruck. Sam Draper's a better forward at this stage than Nick Bryan. We know Brad is really determined to play 2 rucks, so I think if they're both fit, Bryan and Draper are going to play a lot, and he's going to have to be pretty effective in the forward line. There's doubts about Peter Wright. Is he even in Essendon's best 22? Where does Harry Jones fit in? Nate Caddy can't be the number 1 man at this stage of his career, so he's going to need Sam Draper to support him and just be a bit more consistent. And even, I thought he played pretty well on the weekend, but there's still those signs that, just the hack, grabbing it out of the ruck and the hack kicking forward. He just needs to stick to the basics sometimes. You're a ruckman, tap the ball. Sometimes grab the ball out of the ruck, that's fine. But, your primary role is to tap it down to them or dish it off to them. So he's just got to play the basics a bit more and just narrow the gap between his best and his worst. Because when he's at his best, he can be a significant player in a game of footy, whether it's forward or in the ruck. So let's hope we see a bit more of that this year.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about what he's going to have to do up forward. Like you spoke about the ruck work there, but really, like he needs to be taking the best defender every single week if he's playing forward. If it's not Peter Wright who's in the team,
100%.
because the opposition teams will go, well, look, all right, they've got Nate Caddy, Kyle Langford's going to be playing every single week if they're both fit. Then you're going to need to send someone to the big guy, and he needs to be playing well enough that opposition teams go, oh, forget about Drapes. He's not a problem. He's got to be keeping someone accountable. 100%. If we're lining up against Gold Coast, we want Collins to be playing on Draper ideally.
Correct.
That's where we want to be, not playing on Langford, because we've seen when Langford takes those really good top end defenders who are a bit bigger than him, he kind of struggles.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that balance with the big guys is going to be really interesting. I'm just fascinated to see what they do in round 1. My fear is don't go up to the Gold Coast top heavy. If you go up top heavy, they got Rioli and they got Noble and they got Ewland and they got all these quick blokes off the back flank. You can't be playing Jones, you can't be playing Wright and the 2 rucks and Caddy. You can't be doing that. You got to get the balance of the side right. So that's why those 5 blokes we mentioned there, they can't play on the same side. Maybe only 3 of them can play in the team. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they do that with selection throughout the year.
Yeah, and quickly, your third person.
Jordan Ridley. I mean, Jordan Ridley's he's a really nice footballer and he's been a consistent footballer, but can he be a significant player in the competition? He should be. I know the body's let him down the last few years, but he's got the talent. He's a great interceptor. He's a beautiful kick. But does he want to just be a nice, good AFL footballer, or does he want to take himself to that next level? All-Australian squad, one of the best interceptors in the competition. So I think he's got another level to go to, and at 25 years of age, this is the time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, a lot of it does come down to the body. Is he actually going to be able to get that out there consistently? Because last year was such a write-off, really, for him. There's like Darcy Parish is probably in the same boat, where they're two guys who we know what they can do when they're fit and at their best, but is that something that we're never going to see again, or is this something they can get back to? We'll move on to our next prompt. How does Essendon improve in 2025?
Yeah, I think two things that I think stand out for me, and they're both sort of to do with the forward half of the ground, is defensive pressure. And the ball for too many years now has come out too easy from the Essendon forward line. And if you look at all the good sides around the competition, they've got 3 or 4 good small forwards / high half forwards in their team, which Essendon just haven't had. But so you got Kako now; he's going to play pretty much every week. It looks like defensive pressure is one of the strengths of his games. Can we get a bit more? I know he's injured at the moment, but out of Alwyn Davey Jr., where's Jai Menzies at? Jay Gresham was. I don't know how you thought Gresham's year last year. Okay, but I don't see enough of Gresham at the fall of the ball, at the fall of the big guy's feet in the forward line, and I don't see enough defensive pressure from him. So I'd like to see more then. And you got sort of Mac Guelphy in the mix as well, who obviously won't be available at the start of the year. So the forward pressure, and then it's just that connection between the midfielders and the forwards. I mean, no one had more of the ball last year than Essendon. I think we were top 3 for inside 50s, but we were right down in the bottom 5 or 6 when it came to scoring. So I think Nick Martin playing a different role will definitely help that. I don't want to see Nick Martin at half-back. I want to see Nick Martin as a forward mid for the majority of the year and just getting that connection piece right. But I think we've got to work on that forward end and keep the ball in and use the ball a little bit better. And we don't have a problem finding the footy, but turning that into score has been a bit of a problem.
Yeah, exactly. We want to make sure that we're getting the ball in the hands of the good users. Your Merritts and your Martins.
Yep.
Someone who can bite off that 20-metre dinky kick that just means you got a mark inside 50, even if it's not from the best position. At least you've got it there. Like, I remember that Carlton game last year where it felt like we pinned them in. We were just holding them there in the 50, and he just couldn't convert. We couldn't get a mark. We couldn't get a clean possession. They'd obviously flood it back, which doesn't make it very easy. But a lot of teams are like that, where it's like you do all this stuff so well and you can't convert, and then what happens is the opposition get the ball. You're tired, you've overcommitted, and there's a goal at the other end. So you're absolutely right. It's just taking those percentages, just getting the opportunities, get it in the right hands, and then hopefully we have someone who's reliable in front of goal this year that can go back and convert it. Because the back end of the year we went from being a very accurate team to a very inaccurate team, and that was costly in the end.
Yeah, it was, and I sat down and watched Brad Scott's chat with Kel Twomey the other day, and he was spot on. Our win-loss in the first half of the year was inflated. A lot of it due to goal-kicking accuracy in tight games. And once it flipped, it doesn't take much. In the second half of the year, we were probably not playing better, but we were probably dominating games a little bit more. But you saw the Gold Coast game, the Adelaide game, and a few of the other games in the back half of the year. If you're just bombing it in and not scoring, well, you're going to get bitten in on the bum the other way.
That's it. And we'll go to our last prompt. Essendon will finish blank on the ladder because why?
I think 10th. I think 10th for the Bombers this year. I can't see them making the finals. I just look at some of the other teams that missed the 8 last year, and I think their rate of improvement will be a little bit higher than ours. So probably the 3 that stand out are, Collingwood. I know they're old, but I think if they've got good player availability, I can't see them missing the finals again. There's no excuse for Fremantle this year. I mean, they were in for all year, but lost the last 4, and they've got talent. And I think the team we play in the opening round, the Suns, should improve again. I'm not convinced the Suns are going to make the finals, but I think the natural improvement of those three teams might be a little bit more than us at this stage. But that's not saying we can't have a decent year. It's not saying that some individuals can't improve, and I think that's the part we're looking for. As we said, we were talking off camera before. I think the club is still trying to catch up from making that mistake at the end of 17, thinking we're a bit closer, getting out of drafts, and then you lose Joe Danaher on top of that. You bring in Sard, who was great. You lose him, and then if you look at the first round draft pick since, with Cox. We know Reid can play, but he hasn't been able to get there. We think Perkins is going to be a good player. We're not sure about Ben Hobbs. We're not sure about Elijah Sardis, but I'm still confident he's going to be a pretty good player. And Caddy and Kako look good, but So if we can get those players going to another level, even if we don't play finals, I think we can still have a decent year. But as I say, I think there's just a few too many outside the 8 from last year that will improve a bit more than us.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Look, I think a lot of the people I've been speaking to in the lead up to the season are feeling the same. Like, there are those doomsdays who really think we're going to struggle, but I don't think we regress much, but I just don't think we reprove much. It just feels like it's going to be one of these years where we're just going to be hovering around that mark, and you get a couple of wins, things go your way, and then maybe you sneak 8th or 7th, or they don't go your way and it's 11 or 12. Like, it is just the nature of the competition at the moment, that it is so tight. Thankfully, we play Richmond twice, which should be 2 wins to start the season. So let's hope we can bank them.
Yeah.
And then we'll see how we go from there. But yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's going to be one of those years where there's just a little bit too much that needs to go right for it to be really good, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to need great player availability. And look, a few teams will drop out of the 8. There's no doubt about that. But I just think those other 3 that I mentioned are more likely to jump up than we are at this stage. But let's hope we're wrong. Let's hope we're wrong and we get surprised.
Yeah. Have you got a slider who's coming out?
I think the Bulldogs are in a bit of trouble. Even before their injuries, I wasn't convinced. And I'm not sold on Port Adelaide either. But I probably was the same this time last year. But I just, I look at Port Adelaide. They got those 3 great midfielders, which, are always going to get them through. But, geez, no Dixon there. I know he wasn't great last year, but Marshall's out. It's a big responsibility on Georgiades and Finlayson's a bit flaky. So, I think Port and the Bulldogs look a little bit vulnerable to me. But, who knows what's going to happen with Brisbane? I mean, we saw what happened with Geelong and Collingwood. They've been knocking on the door for so long, Brisbane. Now that they've finally got there, Joe's a massive loss.
Huge loss.
I don't think there's any guarantee that Brisbane are going to play finals this year as well. So, it's tough to predict. But there won't be much between that, 5th to 12th, 13th on the ladder again, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the Lions are a long summer of functions celebrating the flag and a few extra pots than they normally would in the off season, and there might be some tired legs start of the year, and they've got a way to go. I mean, and even just some some of the coaching changes is going to be very interesting. Obviously, with Ken Hinkley sort of handing off to Carr, is this going to be a good handover? Could it be a bad hangover? Dean Cox is now in charge of Sydney.
Yep.
Is he going to be able to are we going to realise that Longmuir is just a horse is just a much better coach than we...
Possibly.
There's so many questions that we don't know. So
there is.
It's very... Yeah.
Yep. The Beveridge is under pressure. The Blues. Vossi needs a good year. There's a lot going on in the coaching space this year. So let's hope it's not Brad under any sort of pressure. But I don't think he is in terms of his job anyway.
Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty safe for another year unless we finish below Richmond somehow. Jules, you've been very generous with your time. Listeners and viewers can obviously catch Julian on SEN. Is there anything, particular show or anything you want to plug, or just SEN in general?
Just the run home, of course, with Andy and Gazy, 3 to 5:30 Monday to Friday is my main gig. So listen to the boys whenever you can.
Easy. Thanks, mate. We'll speak soon.
Good on you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing our season preview edition with some fantastic media guests, and I'm very happy to be joined by Cal Twomey from afl.com.au. Hello, mate.
Hello, Rob. Good to be with you. Interesting year ahead.
It certainly is. It certainly is. What's your vibe on Essendon 2025? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Are you somewhere in the middle? Where do you sit?
Well, I mean, the question is, what does optimistic actually mean? I think the direction that a lot of decisions have been heading in over the last 6 to 8 months have been pretty consistent. And I feel like what we've seen from a list point of view, I thought they drafted really well. Now it's over to the players, and it's always over to the players really at this point. But generally, it's going to be a pretty fit group. Touch wood. We record this before the practice game against Geelong, but generally a pretty fit group, I think, heading into opening round. I don't know. No one really knows. But I think that the reality is last year they spent a lot of time in the top 5 or 6 on the ladder. Now, there was a reasonable run of games there where they probably played against some opposition that they were better than, but the percentage was a bit lower.
Yep.
They need to get that right and get some defensively sort of minded aspects to the game more so. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason to suggest that it'd be that much worse than last year. One player's left. The rest has been pretty stable. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows how a team's going to go, really. But I think there's enough. I just want to see a group of the younger players come through another level. I'd like to see Durham take another step after what was such an exciting year last year. The same for Caldwell. Some opportunities for Archie Perkins inside 50, where I think he's been most damaging. Nick Martin to continue his progress. Zach Reid to play well and play a full season. So I think and Elijah Sardis as a part of that too. Archie Roberts to continue getting games. So there's different measures of success. I don't think you have to win a final necessarily this year for it to be a roll gold successful year. I think there's other ways that this year can be judged.
Yeah, no, well said. It's all about that growth from within, which we haven't seen a lot of it over the last few years. There've been individual moments here or there, and sort of alluded to Sam Durham before. But like you said, if it's a big group of guys who do take that next step, you'd think that most rational Bomber fans are happy. Let's launch into our preview questions, mate, that I've sent you in advance. So we'll start with number one. It's a big season for blank.
Who's blank? What number does he wear? I'm going to go with number two, Sam Draper. I think it's a big year for Sam on a number of levels. We haven't seen the best of him, and that's been for differing reasons. Unfortunately, his body's let him down at different stages. The groin and adductor issues that he's had in the last sort of 18 months prior to this pre-season wore him down. Couldn't use that power and burst that clearly is a big part of his game. And when your job is to jump and you've got dodgy groins, it makes your task pretty hard. In saying that, he's had a good summer. The interesting part for me this year is about threefold. He's a free agent, so he will want to be playing as best footy as he can. Then there's the forward line aspect to his game. How good can he be as a marking target? And then coupled with that, how good can he be as a converter in front of goal? And then the other part to the whole Sam Draper discussion is how does the combination work with Nick Bryan? Because I think Nick's had a really good summer as well. He works well with the midfielders. So that's going to be an interesting battle, and combination and partnership. Every ruckman has to work with someone in their side. In the past, when he's played his best footy, it's usually been with a pinch hitting forward. But is there room for those two, plus Peter Wright, plus Harry Jones as a tall, plus Nate Caddy, plus Cole Langford, who's basically a tall forward. So, you throw all those things into the mix. I feel like it's a big year for Sam Draper, and it's better for everyone, including himself, clearly, if he plays well, because he'll get a better deal out of it. He'll get better offers out of it. He'll show what he's worth, and Essendon will be better for it as well. Staying fit's, step number 1, 2, and 3, I think, for that sort of whole conundrum. But so far, so good. It's just about, I think, putting it on the table and showing what he's got.
Yeah. On the free agency front, I think most people would have seen that it's, a South Australian club. Adelaide's been the one that we've already heard things about, although it is only February. Do you think there's any likelihood that Port Adelaide come into this conversation, or even a club that's not one of the two SA clubs, or is that just the end of the story there?
Well, you say only February, but I think it was actually in about August or July last year that we said that Adelaide would be chasing Sam Draper. So it is, but it's probably been live for about 8 months already. I think, no, I don't think Port Adelaide. No, they've just signed Dante Vicentini. He's going really well for another couple of years. He had some Melbourne interests. He's stayed there. And I think he's a young ruckman on the rise. And then Jordan Sweet come to their footy club and did some good things last year. Ivan Soldo clearly needs to get his body right after an injury hit season. But they've already got 3 rucks on their list. So, no, I don't think Port Adelaide would or should be in that market. They've got other targets that they'll be looking at. And Adelaide will as well. But when you look at the Adelaide ruck situation, obviously they just signed Lockie McAndrew. Kieran Strawn's now just about done in terms of his fitness and capability to get out on the park. And then Rolly O'Brien's, at the back end of his career, clearly. So the fit is right, and it would actually help them protect a draft pick as well as a free agent. So that's the other part to it. Other clubs in Victoria, I do think there would be that discussion. And the discussion's got to be around, from an Essendon point of view, not just Draper, but Brian as well. Like,
Yeah.
this is a year for both of them. It's a unique role, isn't it? I was going to say it's like the wicketkeeper, but it kind of isn't. It's probably more the wicketkeeper if two of them are on tour.
Yeah, that's right.
There's not two wicketkeepers in the team at the once. Although at the moment
Yes.
we see Alex Carey and Josh Inglis playing at the same time.
It's true. It's true.
But it is that sort of it's a unique position for both of them to be playing with and to sort of be asserting their authority. But Nick Bryan's in year 6 this year, I think, 2019 draft. So, yeah, and Draper clearly in sort of year 9, I think. So, off the top of my head. So there's a lot to prove, but I do think that he'll have offers not just from here, but also in Victoria. And the Bombers will want to keep him as well.
Of course. We'll move on to our second prompt. How does Essendon improve in 2025?
I spoke to Brad Scott a couple of weeks ago on afl.com.au, and he was very quick to point out that the year before in 2023, it was, an efficiency maybe that had kept things in line and kept things, motoring along in the first half of the season before that epic fallout at the end of the year. Whereas last year, the difference was that inside 50s were coming at will. It was just about actually how to make the most of them. So that connection between midfield into scoring chains is something that I'll be looking at, and how do they actually make the most of that forward line set up and structure, and what's the best mix. Clearly, Isaac Kako is going to be a part of that, and he's been ready to play in opening round for a year, I think. Like, he would have played 20 games at AFL level for most teams last year.
Yeah.
Got no doubt about that. And Caddy's, development second year in, now that he can run and move and has had a full pre-season essentially, is pretty exciting too. So, yeah, those are two parts of it. But the forward line, I think, from a holistic point of view, has needed some work to get right in terms of just the shape of it. And we all know that. I think any Essendon supporter who's watched them play looks at it and thinks, well, how can you have 60 inside 50s and kick 8 goals? That, as an example.
Yeah.
There's something amiss there. So that's something that if they can get that right, that's going to be essential to not necessarily a huge rise up the ladder, but they'll be playing better footy and have a little bit more rhythm to the connection of it all. I mean, as Brad talks about regularly, and he's right, and all the coaches do, to be honest. I've interviewed a few of them recently. It's a competition of marginal gaps and differences. Like when Essendon was 4th on the ladder, they were 2 games ahead of 14th. Like it's. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know, but if you can get those little bits better, and it sounds like that's been a big working focus for them over the pre-season, then potentially it can sort of sort things out there.
Yeah, you're right. Firstly, I do want to say fantastic conversation that you had with Brad. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if any listeners or viewers haven't consumed that and gone and listened to it and watched it, you should. It's really, really good quality. You're so right about the quality of inside 50s, because I think a lot of people might just think about the targets, but also it's about who's actually putting the ball inside 50. And the example I always bring up on our show is that I would rather see Nick Martin doing a dinky 20-metre kick inside 50 than in the defensive 50, which is what we saw a lot of last season. So I'm hoping to see him forward the ball more, him, Merritt, and a few other guys who I think we all consider to be good users, and hopefully that means that it's landing in the lap of a Langford or a Caddy or a Kako instead of on the top of a big pack.
Yeah. I mean, he is the player that you would want 2 of. There's no doubt about that. I think players, supporters outside of Essendon supporters probably don't realise how good Nick Martin can be, I think, and how good he has been really across his first 3 years. It's been a pretty remarkable pick-up. But the difficulty and the challenge is that all these good teams and teams that are right at the top end of the ladder have these players who are going off half back and setting up all the play. And without Martin being that guy, then Essendon doesn't have one.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. The robbing Peter to pay Paul thing is real, because the other group, and look, Mason Redmond's been a rebounder. He's going to play a little bit of midfield time here and there this year, but he's been a rebounder. I don't think he has that same, pull the kicks off type of strategy to his game. It's more the length, I'd say, the meterage, and that's fine. You need that as well. Andy McGrath, I think, still plays his best footy when he's a disciplined small back. And sort of a hold down player rather than the run and pick the gaps player. So it leaves you a bit short on options there. So Archie Roberts played a little bit of halfback last year. I think he played a little bit on the wing as well. Saad El Wali would be a chance on that sort of wing role too. But yeah, I think Martin will end up being just the Roma really again, and probably a little bit more forward half Roma. The other bit is I spoke to Zach Merritt yesterday at Captain's Day, and he did say that he expects to be playing a lot more around the square than he has in recent years, including half back, including for half forward. So he kicked a career high goal tally last year, 14, I think it was. He was quick to remind me that it was also a career high points tally of 15. And I said, would you be looking to try and get, he knows his numbers, Zach. Would you be looking to try and hit that 20 goal mark? He said, yeah, of course, but I'm actually probably going to be playing some more half-back time. And look, he is the guy that, could do that. And if Elijah Sardis gets going as well in the midfield, then it sort of opens up the capability to throw Merritt around wherever he sees fit to be that player. I think he ends his career probably as that Zorko type. In saying that, he probably ends, or he wants to end his career in, 2035. So hopefully it's a fair way off.
Oh, if it means it's Zorko-like and he has a premiership cup in his hands, I think we'll all be happy wherever he's playing. And then before we move on, I think the other player who affects that situation is Jordan Ridley, because I consider him to be a very good user, particularly for a key defender type player. And not having him for a lot of last season meant that there wasn't as many outlet options as you can kind of rely on Ridley to hit a good pass. So hopefully
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that. And also, I'd like him to take it on more with his kicking too, because he's actually, as you say, a really good kick and penetrating. He can spot the right option. I think if he can start to be that creator as well occasionally, a little bit more in his percentage of kicks, I think that'd be better off. The other part to this that is, as we said at the start, sort of the unknown quantity of all this is Zach Reid, because his kicking is as good as Jordan Ridley's, potentially even better. We just haven't seen him. So he's the ultimate sort of fingers crossed type of player about what he can do for the players around him more than just himself. Essendon's spoken about this a lot over the last couple of weeks. The luxury potentially of having Ridley, Mackay and Reid in the same team, it hasn't happened yet. So hopefully we see a bit of that this year to basically get a bit of ping off half back.
Yeah, I think, did we get like a quarter in the practice match last season against Geelong before Reid
something
got
like
hurt?
that.
It was something like that, and it was very short-lived, but hopefully it's a lot longer than that this season. We'll move on to the last prompt there, Cal. People say it's a mugs game tipping where people are going to finish, but I'm still going to ask you anyway. Essendon will finish blank on the ladder because why?
Yeah, I'm going to take the cop out because I haven't actually done my crystal ball yet on AFL.com.au, and I feel like I'm in a bit of flux around how I feel about the Bombers. But I think ultimately the aim should be finals. The ability is finals. The capacity of the team is finals. And there's nothing to say they can't win a final. Is that where I'm going to actually tip them to finish? I don't know if I have that faith yet. And that's probably everyone all and sundry. But I don't think it'll be as... There's been some pretty glum outlooks, I reckon, I don't know what the betting is, but I think it's reasonably on Sportsbet. Essendon's bottom four chances would be pretty strong, I'd imagine, amongst the punters. But I don't see it as being like that. And to me, the narrative around how to replace 40 goals, well, you'd hope that Perkins kicks 20 more, and you'd hope that Kako kicks 20, and Caddy might kick 25 as well, and things might change on that front as well. So I don't see that as a major issue or talking point as much. I think it's more just can 3 to 5 players like Durham and Caldwell did last year, but can 3 to 5 emerge together and join the players that are already at that level? So I think people are hoping that it could be Nick Cox. It's going to be unlikely to see him at the start of the year. He's still battling the concussion symptoms from December, so that'll be a challenge. It's sort of an unfortunate setback for him. Hopefully he can get going at sort of that. But you're looking at that sort of age group, aren't you? And everyone raises the same names. Can Sardis do it, even though he's only in his third year now? I think his pre-season shown that his hands work has been a big sort of emphasis for him. Can you be a great clearance handballer and get the ball out of stoppage? Because he's always been able to find the ball. I think he can do that. I think Durham's got heaps of upside. and Caldwell I'd expected to go to another level too. So that's why I think somewhere around that 7 to 12 point of the draft. I hope that's not a cop out, but that's probably where I have. And as we said before, we're talking margins at that point. So, I don't think winning a final is beyond Essendon. I'll put it that way. If things go right and probably drew a little bit of luck on the injury front and from the injury heavens at some point, sooner or later this century.
Yes, we'd certainly hope so. Look, I'm not far off myself. Like last year I said Essendon are a middle 6 team, and I think we're still a middle 6 team. Like I'm kind of with you. I see other people being like, oh, they're bottom 4, bottom 3, so they're going to be one of the worst teams. I'm like, I really don't see that. But at the same time, I don't see us in the top 6. I think that, like you said, if some things go well, you sneak the 8. If things don't go well, then you're a 10, 11, 12, whereas where things were last season. So I think a lot of people are sort of thinking that same margin.
And the bit that I think is important as well, you hear from Essendon supporters, and I understand the frustration. Like everyone who's got a red and black leaning understands it. But I think the only way to get it right is to go the long way now. So they've clearly made that decision to go the long way, and without any sugar hits or short-term focuses. The trade and off-season last year proved that was the way they were thinking. They could have got Dan Houston done by 9:02 on the first day of trade period if they really wanted him. It would have been done. He wanted to go to a big Victorian club. They had the money to do it. They had the pick that was going to be moved out one way or the other anyway. But they chose not to. And I think that sort of surmised a little bit around where they see themselves at. But also Tasmania is coming. They got 2 first rounders, 2 second rounders for this year's draft. If you can get together a couple more good years of drafting, I think they drafted well last year. Caddy, of course, has all the star factor already. So all of that, I think you have to take the long haul, and to get up to what you call the top 6, that first third. It takes a little bit of time in the middle third to try and crack it eventually. So it's a tough comp. Tough comp. Fingers crossed.
It certainly is. I might throw you one extra little question that's unprompted. Obviously, it might depend on where things end up, but if we're coming into the end of season, we're looking at that trade window. Are you hold all our picks regardless of where we finish and let's go to the draft, or is there a certain young West Coast player that if the option's there, do we spend the picks and we try and bring someone like that over?
For Archer Reid?
Yeah, for Archer Reid.
Zach's brother. No, you'd go all out for Harley, no doubt about that. Absolutely no doubt about that. I'd be saying here's this year's 2, and there's the next year's. There's 2026 and 2027 as well where we're at it. Yeah, and he's got a link there, and I'm sure Essendon's kept in contact with the camp all the way through, given the VFL stuff he played as a junior. Yeah, I mean, the other one is Matt Rowell too, which he reported last year that they had interest in. And I think I'm interested to see how Matt Rowell goes against Essendon in the opening round, because traditionally he's done pretty well against Essendon in those slippery, dewy Carrara nights. He's played some good footy, and even under the roof at Marvel as well. So, I think if he stays out of contract, he'd be one that is rock solid. But you don't want to be going for, look, what's Rowell this year? 60s, be 24 by the end of the season, or 24 by the end of the year. You're still getting 8 good years out of him, and Harley, so many more. But no, you got to be active and proactive. It's just about the right players and right choices. So I'd be willing to throw it up and see how they go for sure.
Beautiful. Well, let's hope for Essendon's sake, Cal, that Melbourne finished last and we have pick 1 that we can spend, and we'll see what happens, because that'll make things very interesting. So let's get on the death ride train, and let's hope that's a bad year for the D's.
Yeah, I can imagine there's going to be some debates in your podcasting suites at different points this year around different ambitions.
Yes, they will. Yeah, they certainly will. Yeah, I think I don't know what I've got planned for Adrian, but I don't know. Maybe every time they lose, I might just put some streamers up every week. But who knows? They might have a good year. I actually don't like saying it. I think they might be okay. But
I think they'll be pretty good.
Yeah. Cal, you've been very generous with your time. We love your work as always. If listeners and viewers don't read Cal's amazing work or watch his amazing work on AFL.com.au, you absolutely got to get around it. Cal, thank you for joining us, and we'll speak soon.
No worries, Rob.
Welcome back, everybody. Continuing our season preview journalist edition, I'm very excited to introduce our next guest, the ABCs and the Footy with Broden Kelly's own Marnie Vinall. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk just Essendon. I feel like I do a lot of season previewy stuff, and I've got to talk about all 18 clubs, but not today.
Not today. Look, we can slowly start the Essendon takeover of Broden's podcast, one step at a time. I think there's always room for more Essendon content around.
I agree. And this year, hopefully, in a good capacity and not just in meme form.
Yes, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. How are you feeling about season 2025? We've had a couple of practice games now. The season's about a week or so away. How are you feeling?
Like that optimism that always comes at the very start of the season that I'm so cautious of now. And even before we went into the practice matches, it's just like, okay, like they actually don't mean very much. Like, yes, we get to see like the fitness of the players and the kind of the look and feel before going into the season, but they don't count for anything. And then we beat Geelong and I'm like, all right, premiership's on. Here we go. Flag dons.
Yeah, you're not alone. I think I went through the full roller coaster of emotions on Tuesday night, and it was hard to like say to myself that this is just a practice game, because I think I legitimately was fist pumping sitting on the couch there at points. How did you go?
Yes, kind of the same. Even just being like, even if we lose to Geelong by a couple goals, I reckon that puts us in good stead to make the 8. And then you get to the point where you're like, oh, we beat them by more than 2 goals? It's ours.
Hey, I like it. Let's launch into our preview questions that we've got lined up. So our first one is, it's a big year for blank.
I think that this is a really original opinion that no one else is going to say.
Yeah.
Nate Caddy.
Hey, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
No one else is pumping up his tyres. I think last year we saw the glimpses of what is going to be this year from Caddy, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So last year we saw a lot of that, like a lot of him looking like a real key forward that Essendon's kind of lacked. Like he's got a lot of that, like he can really launch at the ball and he just looks so comfortable in that role. And I have, if the ball's going inside 50 and Caddy's there, like I have a lot of faith and trust that I don't have with a lot of Essendon's other forward line.
Yes.
And I know that there's a lot of expectations that are being put on his shoulders, but he seems like he can carry it quite well. He seems like he's got so much confidence and he looks very fit. He looks very strong. I know he's very young, but he has said that he's worked on his fitness. He also has mentioned that he expects that he'll have to play everywhere and Brad Scott's going to put him everywhere. But in my mind, he's a key forward and he will just be developed as such.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Like Brad sort of, I can't remember which interview it was he did pre-season, but he spoke about how they sort of ran him through the midfield a couple of times during pre-season and they were like, no, let's keep him closer to goal. And I think we're going to need him there because we don't really know how the rest of the forward line's going to set up. Obviously, Kyle Langford will be down there. We expect Isaac Kako to be down there, but will we see Peter Wright feature? How's Archie Perkins going to go? Is Jones going to play forward at times? Is Merritt going to play forward at times? So I think you need a bit of stability down there, and he looks like a really talented kid who can do it. I guess it's just hard for Essendon is that, like, how much of our hopes can we be pinning on a guy who is so young? Like, he's clearly talented, we can all see that, but how much can we actually pin on a kid like this?
Oh, I so agree. And in my dream scenario, the answer to that original question is it's going to be a big year for Harry Jones. I want Harry Jones to have a really good year and get consistency and really develop into the forward that there was a few years ago where he was really touted as the next big thing. It was like him and Perkins, and I don't think he's really got there a lot with injury. But, oh my God, I want it so bad.
It'd be nice. Go back to Nate. Like, what's your pass mark? If we're talking goals, goals, assists, what's the pass mark for a year? Like, let's assume he has a fit year, he plays most of the games. Like, what's the tally that at the end of the season you come away and go, I'm happy with that?
Oh, goodness. That's a really good question because I don't usually like summing up individual performances based on stats, because I think that stats definitely tend to lie, and there's a lot of work done off the ball, particularly when it comes to things like roles like key forwards, because a big role of a forward is to often drag defenders away from other players. Like Harry Jones might not get the ball because he's allowing Nate Caddy to get all of the ball. We don't really know, but that's a really good question that I wish I had a very good answer to. What would you say?
I'll be modest and look, I think 25 is a good number because that's like a goal a game. Assuming you play 23 games, I think that's a pretty reasonable number. Like, obviously, we'd love to see 30s or, God, even a 40-goal year. But knowing his age, I'm like, look, if he kicks 25 goals, that's a tick for me. Like, I think I'm going pretty low there. But I don't know. Do you think it's higher than that?
And also just thinking that he only played 10 games last year.
Yeah.
Is Brad Scott going to manage him, and so we don't actually see him on the park for every single game, and they develop him a bit slower? So I kind of like your reasoning that it will even out at a goal a game. Let's go 25. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Look, I'd hope he plays most games. Like, he's had a proper preseason, unlike last season. He's had a year in the system, and he kind of forced his way into the team last season. Like, the way Brad was speaking, I'm like, we won't see him in 2024, but we did. He forced his way in. So, look, time will tell. If he's kicking bags and he's playing like he did against the Cats in the practice match, I think he's pretty safe. Let's move on to our next prompt. How does Essendon improve in 2025?
I genuinely hate the narrative around that a team can be quote-unquote too nice, but I do think that Essendon has lacked a bit of aggression in the way that they've played the past couple years, and a bit of just unrelenting aggression and grit. I think that they can pull away, especially if they find themselves on the back foot. They tend to stay on the back foot. They don't have the ability to really keep pushing and put themselves back in the narrative. And I would like to see more of that. I do think a lot of the improvement will come. Oh God, Brad Scott's going to love that I say consistency, but genuinely just consistency. Even just, who I would love to just have a lot more confidence in? Dylan Shield. Like, I would love if Dylan Shield just gets a lot of consistency, and so the veteran players just do their jobs and really get to it, so that the improvement can come from a lot of the fresh talent that's coming through, that's getting hyped up a lot. I mean, even Elijah Sardis, like, I would love to see him be able to really develop and take off, and I don't think that these young kids coming through are going to push Essendon into necessarily finals contention, although that would be the hope, but at least develop enough that gives them a good springboard into 2026. So I do think most of their improvement will come from consistency with the veterans, and then just developing the young ones.
You spoke about the aggression there. Are there particular names in the side that you go, these are the guys who can kind of fly the flag? Like, you think of players over the eras of Essendon, and like you said, we kind of haven't had that. We haven't had the the Bash brothers and the Mighty Ducks who come in and fly the flag. Like, maybe Draper, maybe Merritt at times. Is there someone you go, this is a guy who you can kind of look forward to be the aggressor?
Oh, I so see Merritt both having that role, and he's the one, if like an actual biff is to start, to pull all the players away and be the adult in the room. But I do see Merritt with that role. God, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think, even just like when that Luke Parker, Dylan Shield incident happened, was that last year or the year before?
Maybe 2 years ago, I think.
2 years ago, wow.
Maybe even 3, I don't know,
It did feel like there was no one on the park that was getting in amongst it. And so I don't see I don't see Langford doing that. I can't see Peter Wright doing that.
Mason Redman. I could see Mason Redman.
Yes, Redman's a good one. I can see Redman doing that. Even Parrish. I'm like, I can't really see Parrish. No.
What about it? I mean, I know he's young, but what about a Ben Hobbs? He strikes me as someone who would like a bit of rough and tumble. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, I love rough and tumble. Yes, you know what? It's. I would love it if it was those players, and not that Hobbs is a fringe player, but those players that aren't necessarily your first thought mainstays. Really prove their spot by just being like, I'm on the park. I deserve this spot. This is my team.
Well, sometimes for fringe guys, those can be the things that might get you picked in the side.
Exactly.
If they're sitting up and they're weighing up two players, and one of them is just has a bit more of a physical presence, likes a bit of biff, likes to really push the opposition, you'll probably take him, against the other guy. So look, it's definitely a good trait to have. Let's move on to our final prompt. Essendon will finish blank on the ladder because why?
Well, sticking with the theme of consistency, on the Footy with Brendan Kelly, when we did our ladder predictors, I did put Essendon at 14th, and I know that a lot of pundits are putting them in their bottom 4.
Yeah.
I do genuinely see them finishing around 11th or 12th, but it's just so hard pre-season when all other sides are looking very snazzy, are looking really good, and so it's harder when we don't know how injuries are going to impact sides.
Yeah.
I just, when I think about it, I'm like, yes, I can see them finishing 11th. I can see them finishing 10th. I can see them making a push for finals, but then I can't put other teams below them when I'm considering the other teams as well, because a lot of other teams are looking really, really good pre-season. They always do. We always get in this just pool of optimism when it comes to all of the sides. But in saying that, this was before the pre-season games, and seeing them against Geelong did inject me with a lot more confidence, just seeing how fit they looked and how well they attacked that game. And this season they won't be burdened with that weight of expectation that they have in previous years, because so many pundits are putting them in their bottom 4. And even when we talk about all of the young ones coming through, this makes me feel so old, but they won't be burdened with the history of the Bombers necessarily and what happened 20 years ago, because, Nate Caddy hasn't been alive to see the last final. Yes, they are. I know. So they haven't, all of these young kids that are starting won't necessarily be carrying the weight of expectation and history that a lot of the older players are. And so I'm hoping that that's going to translate to a lot of freedom in how they play and a lot more dare in how they play and creativity, you'd hope. Yeah. So all of that ramble is to say that I did put them at 14th, but I do see them finishing as high as around 10, really.
That's okay.
Where have you put them?
Yeah, so I've said 9th because I don't think we regress much, but barring an injury crisis, because I do look at the list and go, look, it can get shallow very quickly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's assume it's okay. Yes, I do think there is natural improvement there. I don't think we regress much, but also I can make the case for so many teams to make the 8, and I just feel like it could be a year where we go, a lot of things were okay, but we still just weren't good enough. That's sort of where my head's at. Who were the 4 clubs you had finishing below us? So who was your 15 to 18? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I do.
Yeah.
Richmond 18th,
Yep.
West Coast, North, and then I put Melbourne just because I wanted to make fun of Broden Kelly, who goes to Melbourne.
Hey, if that's picks, what's that? Pick 4 and 5 in the draft for Essendon, then hey, that's enough for Harley Reid, I reckon. So that could be a go. But back to what you were saying though about the young guys, I do like that idea that, look, it's kind of on them to write the story, because Essendon has carried some burdens through the last decade or more post saga, and these guys who just were very young when that happened, obviously weren't playing AFL footy, were at the club, don't really know that much about it, don't have to think about it, whereas your Zach Merritts, who basically was playing in 2016 when the ban year happened, obviously Dylan Shield, Todd Goldstein, who were playing AFL at the time, they know what happened in the story, but these young kids, they don't. It's about their own destiny. It's about them having that opportunity. But you're also right that we haven't done anything to prove to people that you can tip us to be in the top 8. Unless you're doing it on faith, which I'm sure there's some supporters of ours listening and watching this who have got Essendon in their 8. It is on faith, because I think we could all make better arguments for other teams than our own, sadly. That is just the case. Yes,
100%. Because I'm the same. I'm like, I feel like you should back your team in, because otherwise what's the point of being a supporter, and what's the point of being a sports lover if you're not going to back your own team in? But then when I have to do things like my ladder predictor as a sports reporter and not as an Essendon fan, it's like, oh, actually,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know about this team.
Yeah.
No, but like, it's such a marathon of a year. Like, I hate doing predictions so much, because who knows how anyone's going to look like when it comes to September. So much can happen in that time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so hard to pick. I think one of the things as well is, I think there's a lot of supporters who have been burnt over the years. And look, last year was a real hard one, because round 17, it looked like things were okay. Like, it looks like, hey, finals could be on here. Top 4 or not. Look, it looks like finals are a real opportunity. And I think a lot of people go, look, if I don't have expectations, I can't be burnt. Mm-hmm. The problem for me is that we win a couple of games and I'm on the train. I'm on, the Jesse who's on this pod always has his train to finals that he talks about, and I'm on board. I'm getting a ticket straight away. And then what happens is the train derails and I'm upset. So,
well, even like AFLW is only, last year it was 11 rounds in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
At the end of 10 weeks in the men's season, Essendon were top 2.
I know.
Like, how do you know?
You don't know. You don't know. It's just, yeah. It's so hard to pick. It is like, I feel like it's almost foolish sometimes having these conversations, because who's actually right? Like, I mean, I don't know anyone who goes back and looks at the ladder predictors pre-season. I mean, unless you're in like one of those two tipping comps who might do something like that. But yeah, it's often a case of just going, oh, that team's good, that team's bad. I mean, I could make the case of probably 15 teams to play finals.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the beast.
I mean, like, do it for Adelaide. No. So I have a question for you. Would you, seeing as you have Essendon at 9th, would you rather make the 8 and then lose the first final and continue that narrative, or finish 9th? I think
like, for me as a fan, I think it would be easier to deal with not making finals. Because, like, yeah, right, the last round or the second last round, when you realise that you're mathematically out, yeah, it'd be pretty upsetting. But you'd go, look, we probably weren't good enough. Losing another final is heartbreaking. Like, I went to the Sydney one up in Sydney a few years ago, and that was awful, an awful experience. To the look at the other lens, though, I think for the playing group, you talk about all these young guys. For your Caddies, your Kakos, your Sardises, your Hobbs, some of these other blokes who wouldn't have played in a final, to have that experience, I think is a good thing. So that's the case for us doing that, and if those are the two options. For me personally, for my own mental health, I think 9th is better for me, but I can see why making finals and losing one could be better in the long run.
Now I'll throw in another hypothetical in the mix. We finish 8. We shouldn't say we. Essendon finish 8.
Yep.
Because Carlton finished 9th, and you stop Carlton playing finals.
Oh, lock it in. Let's do it. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, you had me at Carlton 9th. I'm sold. I
put Carlton 9th on my ladder.
There you go. I love it. Marnie, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much for joining us on our preview edition heading into season 2025. Best of luck with your work. Listeners and viewers, you can, of course, catch Marnie's great work on the ABC, as well as the Footy with Broden Kelly podcast. You can find on YouTube and wherever you listen to this podcast. I'm sure you can find it there as well. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, and we can check in September when we know what the ladder looks like.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everybody. Continuing our season preview podcast with some fantastic journalist guests. My next guest is Rohan Connolly from Footyology, ESPN, Australian Community Media, and 3AW. Welcome, Rohan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Another year. This is my 43rd year in the footy business, believe it or not. I did the maths again the other day, and I thought I've been doing this way too long.
How are you feeling about another season of Don's footy?
Look, if I'm completely honest, cynical. I've been burnt too many times before. And having said that, I do really think everything's on the right track.
Yeah.
But I think, like a lot of people, the realisation over the last couple of years has been just how far off the pace they were.
Yeah.
And, I sort of feel like I did say this a couple of years ago, but the biggest reset has been a cultural reset, and it's about dragging standards in the place back to somewhere where they should be, and that's a long-term project. So, and I think the pennies dropped for people. For years and years, Essendon's talked about, we need this to, and it's sort of like putting a Band-Aid over a hole in a damn wall, because you're not set up at the foundations. And we constantly see that the very best clubs and the most consistently performed clubs are the clubs that have everything right. And that means off the field, good administration, stable, and culturally, and this is the most important thing in terms of on-field, there's a professional culture driven by the players and standards that have to be upheld. And that's something that Essendon hasn't had for literally decades now. And I think Brad Scott, credit to him. I mean, I think he's identified how big a shortfall that was, and they're bit by bit getting it back. But it's a long-term project. So, sorry, I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, but I'm expecting more improvement, but that's on a bigger picture scale, and it won't necessarily reflect in a ladder position.
Yeah, no, understood. That's it. It's about growth from within this year. It's less about, we're going to take this guy from here and this guy from here. It's no, let's just build that foundation, continue to grow, and hopefully see something promising from that.
Well, it's about, I'd say, if you want to try and translate it to practical terms, it's this year avoiding that horrendous collapse in the last third of the season that's happened the last 2 years, because that to me is again sort of symptomatic of the shortfall in the culture, as in they didn't have the sort of mental resilience to withstand a few blows and keep going and keep going and keep going. So that's the next step, to stay tough for a full season, not just 2/3 of a season.
Yeah, well said. We'll jump into our preview questions that I've got there for you. So we'll start with number 1. It's a big year for blank.
Well, this could be so many people, but I thought I'd best off go with the one that first came to mind, and it's not even a key player really, but I just think a guy like Harry Jones is a bit, for me, been a bit symptomatic of Essendon, and people that know me well will go, he's a whipping boy for you, and he probably is, and he's a nice guy, and he's a real trier. There's no question about his effort. The problem with Harry Jones for me has been that he was sort of recruited as one thing, and he hasn't really fulfilled the thing he was recruited to be. Having said that, look, maybe he ends up transforming his game completely, and to that end, we're recording this a couple of days after that practice hit out against Geelong. I mean, that was really promising, and the most significant thing about that for him was 27 disposals. That is just so far and away his career best, albeit in a practice game. But his average disposals until now has been something. I think his career average disposals is like 9.
Yeah, wow.
And more importantly, he's been drafted as a key position forward. He's only taken sort of around 4 or 5 marks per game, averages less than 1 goal per game. Now, if that's the sort of role you're going to fill, those figures aren't anywhere near good enough to sustain that. So it depends what he ends up being. Now, I don't want to see him. Look, they got decent value from him out in a wing, but I think Essendon's got better potential wingmen than Harry Jones. If we've got a guy's 6'5" or whatever, I want to see him clunking marks and kicking goals, and that's been a problem for Essendon. So that's where I think Essendon needs Jones to contribute as a key forward who can kick goals. Yeah. And he's got a lot of ground to make up on that score. Plus, he's now in his, what would it be? I think his 6th season of AFL footy, 2020, yeah, or thereabouts. I just don't think they've had the returns that, his talent or his draft position would have suggested he could deliver. So big year for him, and I reckon the standard's got to push up for everyone, and the trading out of Jake Stringer's a good pointer to that. Essendon isn't prepared to say, okay, well, this guy he'll have his shocking days. That's not good enough anymore.
Yeah.
And for Harry Jones, it's not shocking days as much. I mean, Harry Jones has got to have fewer and fewer of those days where he doesn't get a touch and and he runs around like headless chook, and everyone goes, oh, look at his GPS, it's fantastic. But yeah, he hasn't touched the ball. I mean, it's getting back to basics. And for me, for a player like him, it's taking marks and kicking goals. Yeah. If they decide they want to play him as a wingman, fine. But I reckon that would be, and this is another issue Essendon's had far too much of, recruiting guys who are supposed to be one thing and end up becoming another because they're not good enough in the thing they were drafted to be, right?
Yeah.
We've got to get past that. So he to me is a symbol of that. And so from that point of view, plus, he's a guy who's been playing on 1-year contracts. He's got to have a big year.
Yeah, he does. He's out of contract end of the year, so he's certainly playing for his future, whether it's with Essendon or another club. I think the sort of question that a lot of people have been asking this season, and I mean we spoke about it last season as well, is that you've got Caddy, you've got Draper, you've got Bryan, you've got Peter Wright, you've got Jones, you've got Nick Cox, who's got, I mean, that's another issue entirely, but it's like, how do you fit all these big guys into one team? And I guess the solution for Jones is that's why they've stuck him on the wing. Maybe if someone gets injured, he can float forward or he can go forward. But it's a conundrum that we've got.
It is, but it's interesting, that list of names you rattled off. You've mentioned two guys whose number one position isn't key forward. It's ruckman, in Draper and Bryan. I'm not a fan, as a rule, of ruckman trying to be key forwards, or and Peter Wright potentially another one. He won a B&F as a key forward, but I'm not sure that's a natural position for him. It is for a guy like Caddy.
Yeah.
And I think it sort of should be for a guy like Jones. I think Jones is a more obvious natural key forward than most of the other guys you've mentioned, and that's why I think that's where he should be doing it. So time will tell sort of whether he becomes that man. But yes, there's a range of candidates who can fill that role. Are any of them really good enough to be a permanent key forward? I have my doubts.
Yeah. No, well said. We'll move on to the second prompt. How does Essendon improve in 2025?
Yeah, well, this is where I stole my thunder before, really, because, look, I mean, there are specific things. I think the forward line was a real issue, or has been a real issue. I think the defence has been a real issue. The way sides continually go coast to coast. So, there's defensive mechanisms need to be tightened up. I think the pressure at the opposition ball carrier needs to be maintained for longer. I think the forward line efficiency needs to be a lot better. But I would say, again, above and beyond all of those specific technical things, it's this thing about professionalism and culture. And that will be reflected in a more consistent effort week to week. And the last 2 years, I mean, they've almost been carbon copies, haven't they? And Essendon's maintained that professionalism and a high level of competitiveness and a good spot on the ladder for 2/3 of a season, but hasn't been able to sustain it. So that to me is the number one thing. It's got to be sustained, that effort week to week. And look, it's easier said than done. I mean, even the best sides, have a look at Brisbane last year. They lost their first, was it 4 or 5 games?
They lost a few at the start,
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I might be thinking of Hawthorn. I think Brisbane lost their first 3. Hawthorn lost their first 5, Geelong had a run of, I think, 5 losses in 6 games. So you're going to have those tough periods, but you've got to soldier through that and bounce back and not let it sort of completely take the wind out of your sails.
Yeah.
That to me is about culture and about resilience and about embedding those values so that the performance is consistent. I saw an interview with Brad Scott last week, I think, in one of the major papers, and there was a really revealing quote which went to address this sort of thing, and it was about, and again, Zach Merritt is always the poster boy for this, but it's saying that driving those sorts of examples of training performance and leadership and whatever that become a standard that everyone aspires to, and not the subject of almost ridicule, and I read that and I just thought, doesn't that is just so significant that, a guy like Zach actually, and I keep going on about this, but got, voted out of the leadership group. And you look at it now and you realise why? Because he was too demanding. Well, stuff that. That's what he is what the others have to be. Yes, there may be ways in which he can deliver his message better, but his has got to be the standard that everyone aspires to. Not say, oh no, we're not going with him. He's mad. He sets too high a standard. You can't set too high a standard in AFL footy.
No.
So,
exactly.
So again, I could say, we've got to be stronger defensively or better offensively. But again, it comes back to this thing about got to be stronger in terms of attitude to playing professional sport at the elite level. And that's something the whole club hasn't been good enough at for decades. And like I said, I think it's on the right track. But, it's a long-term thing. I just hope I'm still on this planet before... whilst it actually reaches the goal, because I'm creeping on. I turned 60 in a week. I'm having a major complex about that, and I'd like to see one more flag before I die.
I hope you do, Ron. But look, you're spot on. It's something that's not going to be a quick fix. It's something that's going to take a bit of time. People are going to have to put in hard work. It's going to ruffle a few feathers, like you said. There was. It really upsets me having read that quote, because it was kind of something I think a lot of us already sort of knew, but then having it really reinforced, and we look back to those examples, we think about the way Brendan Goddard was treated at the club, where he sort of rolled and been like, how is this what you guys accept? But that's just what the culture's been at the club. And look, hopefully there is a bit of mental strength this year to maybe push it a little bit further into season. Maybe there's also some physical strength of, some good professional pre-seasons, which is something Brad's harped on about. So, look, time will tell. But yeah, you're absolutely right there. We'll move on to our last one, and this is the hard prediction. It's always a bit of a mugs game, this one, but I'll let you have a crack. Essendon will finish blank on the ladder because why?
Well, I only worked this out yesterday. We did our first Footyology podcast, myself and Rodney Eade, yesterday, and I had to come up with a position, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, God, now I'm going to cop it again. So don't get me wrong here. I'm not all gloom and doom about Essendon. I think, like I said, it's on the right track. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they played finals. I mean, they're in the top 8 for most of last year. But I just think if you're looking at the start of a season and what everyone's capable of, I just feel that there are other teams around the same mark talent-wise who are capable or who are probably more reliable, who you'd say, if your life depends on this team or that team, you're going to go with that team.
Yeah.
You just got more confidence in them delivering for longer. So in the end, what I did initially was put them all in groups of 6, so the top 6, middle 6 and bottom 6. I thought I could squeeze Essendon into the bottom of the middle 6, but I didn't. So in the end, I've got Essendon 13th.
Wow.
The thing about 13th these days is, I know I'm desperately trying to sort of have a qualifier here. It is true, though. The ladder is so tight that, one extra win can take you from 13th to 8th, 9th. So I think they're in that territory. I think there's a whole cluster of 7 or 8, 9, even 10 teams whose position may be decided by half a game or a bit of percentage. So, yeah, look, it's 13th, which isn't good at all. But by the same token, it may just be a smidge out of the 8. Look, I'd love to be wrong, and it'll be far from the first time I've been wrong, but I've got more faith in other sides to deliver than I have in Essendon, sadly.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I have sort of viewed us as a middle six team, I guess. Like, I don't think we regress much, but like you said, it is close. Like, it could be a couple of places. I've seen a few people say like, oh, bottom 4, potentially bottom 3, and I was like, I don't think that's right. Like, I think that our worst is still better than a group of sides, but that marginal difference of a few straight kicks going your way, maybe a couple of injuries not happening, and you do sneak the 8. Can I ask?
Which is why I'm saying what I'm saying. I mean, at worst, I think they're better than at least close to half a dozen other sides.
Yeah.
So I guess that what I'm saying is a worst case scenario, but if things go better than I anticipate, that could easily be a lot higher.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have the benefit, thankfully, of playing Richmond twice this year, so we'd hope that that's 2 wins to start the season, although somehow Richmond always seem to turn it on against us regardless of what they're doing. It's so hard to predict. I mean, I went for 9th, was that it's going to be an okay year, but we'll still be disappointed that we don't play finals. That's been my prediction. Can I ask who you had above us from 9 to 12?
Yeah, you can. I'll just have to refer to my notes, though.
No, that's okay.
Here we go. Hang on. I've done it in alphabetical order, which doesn't help. Well, that's how we recorded our podcast. So
I like it.
Let's see. I had Adelaide 15th. So I've got you said above, didn't you?
Yeah. So 12 to 9. Who
okay. I'm still going. They're all the top teams. Yeah, I've got Gold Coast 12th.
Yep.
And I think that's fair enough. I think they've got more talent as a list than Essendon has.
Yep.
I'm still scrolling down. I've got Melbourne 11th.
Yep.
And I think that's justified. I mean, I tipped Melbourne to win the premiership last year. So, Clayton Oliver's apparently training the house down. So, they could easily be a top 8 side. So I think they're more reliable. Port Adelaide, I've got 10th. Well, they were a top 4 team last year, so why wouldn't I have them above Essendon? Richmond 18th, and I've got St Kilda 14th. I've even got St Kilda below Essendon.
Okay.
West Coast, I've got below. Bulldogs, I've got 8. So hang on, who have I missed out there?
Who's 9th? Yeah, who's 9th?
Just bear with me. Well, I might as well read them out at the moment. I've got Adelaide 15th. I've got Brisbane 2nd.
Yeah.
I've got Carlton 7th. I've got Collingwood 8th, just scraping in.
Yeah.
I've got Freo 5th.
Yep.
I've got the Cats winning it.
There we go.
Very happy to argue the toss with anyone on that. I really rate them.
Yep.
Gold Coast 12th. GWS 6th. I've got the Hawks 9th. There you go. I mean, the Hawks are a finalist of last year, precocious talent, and I've got them missing out. And that's purely a hunch just on the basis that, sides are going to be drilling down on them even more this year, and that a couple of those young guys might struggle to back it up, But you couldn't, you look at it, placing Hawthorn above Essendon on a predicted ladder, given they played finals and Essendon didn't, is hardly a stretch, is it?
No.
So when you look at it that way, the teams I've got above them, it's not like, come on, get real, is it? It's quite a realistic forecast.
No, it definitely is. Yeah, we've had the consensus across a few of the chats I've done like this is that we are in a very ssimilar range. I think the lowest someone has said was 14th, and then one person said 7th, but everything is sort of been in that middle group there. And on the Hawks, before we wrap up, I do think that having a harder draw, having finished higher up the ladder, and like you said, you're not the hunter anymore. You're kind of the hunted. People, you've got the eyes on you. You're going to be playing a lot of Friday night footy, and a lot of people are going to be watching. Rohan, you've been very generous with your time, and good luck for season 43 for you in the AFL media circuit. And it's great having you on. We'll speak soon.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and say it every year, go Bombers.